Georgie and Casey. We thought we'd come on for a real quick discussion because there seems to be something blowing up on social media at the moment with a certain brand that has used some wording in one of their promotional materials that would imply that unless you're using their products, you don't care about your horse.
Yeah. And it appears to have blown up quite well, especially on TikTok. It's all over the place. So, yeah, there's a lot of controversy around it. So we thought we'd just come on and have a little discussion about, not about that brand particularly, but just about branding in general and how companies, and it's companies across the board, but we're referring to kind of equestrian companies and the marketing strategies that they use, which sometimes can be a little bit misleading.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because, from a marketing perspective, you're kind of taught, I've done a little bit because I'm a business owner and, so I've gone and done a few courses and stuff, and they kind of tell you that, you should market and you should market your product or your service to solve a problem in somebody's life.
Yeah.
Which is fine because we do all have problems, and horses, as we keep saying, are not easy to keep happy, healthy and sound.
Yeah.
So there are many a problem we come across.
And there's a lot of good ideas that people have come up with to help combat problems.
Exactly. But this is kind of taking a step too far and literally almost guilt tripping. If you don't buy the product, then you don't care about your horse.
Yeah, which is probably a little bit unfair.
Yeah, very much so.
And I think, I think another thing that we, are quite aware of is with the scientific studies, isn't it? Behind a lot of products in the horse world, they will claim about scientific studies and it's science backed, etc., etc. I mean, I think everyone needs to kind of do their own research into that scientific study, because there are a lot of different ways you can do a study. I mean, obviously, there are companies out there who do studies for people and run studies, but if that study is being funded by the brand, I would imagine it's unlikely they're going to come out with negative results.
Well, I mean, that was the case in point of that several years back. There was a brand that had a girth and they'd designed the girth, and then they did the funding to do the research on the girth. And of course, it showed that this girth was the best thing in sliced bread. And I'm like, but of course it's going to be, because they've already invested in designing the girth. Yeah. They're not exactly going to spend X amount of thousands of pounds paying for the research for it to say, actually, it's not that good.
No good, yeah, exactly. And I think the thing is you do need to look at, how big if they're doing a survey on something, how big is the survey? What, who are they asking to trial these things? Are they, if it's a product for horses, are they, asking amateur riders with one horse and, perhaps people who aren't that knowledgeable? Are they asking industry professionals? Are they asking, people who have got multiple horses to try these things? How long is a trial running for? How many people are there? What part of the world is the study being held in? All these things will have an effect on the outcome. And, I think it's very hard to definitively say that something is science backed without the right scientific research, isn't it? And then I think, with scientific research, I think there's a lot of products out there that are produced off the back of a paper that somebody has written, that they've actually done a study over many years, and they're taking that information, and from that information they are producing a product which you could say then is science backed, because they've produced the product after the research. But as you say, if you're producing the product, then you're doing the research, you have to question how reliable is it?
Or even, which is very commonly learned, like, there's a lot of research out there in the horse world, equestrian world, or in the world in general, which can all apply to what we're looking for. And if you find a piece of research that kind of matches your ethos or your philosophy, then you can quote from that, even if it's completely out of context. I mean, I saw some material from this brand, and she made a sweeping statement that without this certain pad, there was high pressure under the horse's saddle, and she couldn't get her hand underneath the front of the saddle. Yet when they put this pad on, and her statement was it reduces 90% of pressure. Well, that's not possible. Like, you can remove peak pressures and distribute pressure over an area, but you cannot reduce pressure by 90% without changing the mass that's sitting on top of it. Like,
so unless
that's
you
not
chop someone in half and then put them on there, then it's not going to work.
Or just put their head back on
it. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, but then that's the thing. But in the end, if fundamentally with a statement like that, what they're saying is that, if they can't get their fingers in the front of a saddle because it's so tight, well, that's not a job for a pad to fix. That's a job for a saddler to fix.
Exactly.
Because the saddle doesn't fit.
Exactly.
It's like all of these things. It's like, are you actually solving the problem, or are you just, compensating for it?
Absolutely.
You're just shifting, one issue to another issue. It's like, but I think that's where people do have to kind of be a little bit more savvy about things. Absolutely,
yeah, and that's exactly it. Like, don't be scared to question it. And I think, we've been having this discussion today, if we've been driving around, haven't we, that it's very easy, especially with social media now, that's literally in the palm of your hand, and you're bombarded with marketing, which is what a lot of social media is nowadays. I mean, if it's influencers marketing products or themselves or something, or much as us, we're trying to promote our YouTube channel. It's an element of marketing, although we're trying to make it be more factual. But you are bombarded with it on a daily basis, and it becomes this, well, you go with the brand that you recognise, and you go with the product you recognise, and you've seen it, and you've seen it, and you've seen it, whether it actually makes the difference that it's promising to or not.
But then that's how, that is how marketing works, isn't it? At the end of the day, but it's like anything that you can have on any subject, it may not be fact, but if you hear it enough times over and over and over, it almost becomes a fact. Yeah, well, you believe in it. But it's not, you believe it. Yeah, you believe what you're being told. When actually, it might be a load of crap, but it's like, people kind of go with it because they've seen it, and they've seen it, and they've seen it, and then there's some testimonials, and then there's this person used it, that person used it, and the thing is, with like all these things, you may have a friend who's tried this thing and it's really worked and it's really made the difference to their horse because that's what that horse needed. Yeah. But then you've then got to be very subjective about it. When you try it with your horse, does it actually make a difference? No, or do you just think it makes a difference? No. It's like the placebo effect, isn't it? Yeah. It's that thing of, you're using it thinking, oh, this is making my horse feel so much better. Well, is it? Are you just riding it better? Have you just had your saddle checked? Has it just had its back treated? I don't know. There could be all kinds of reasons why the horse feels better. Yeah. Or it might not feel at all different. You just think it does. Well, and also, like we were saying in the saddle fitting episode a few weeks back, or last week, that if you change something, then generally horses will go different. Well, they certainly feel different. Yeah. And that's the hard thing, is to then be able to assess, do they feel different good or different bad? Yeah. And like you say, anything that if you've got a saddle that doesn't fit brilliantly and then you put a pad under it, you've shifted the pressure to a slightly different area where maybe they're not sore, and then they will feel better. Yeah. But it may not last. No. So exactly. This is the thing, is there's a lot of stuff out there, and there's a lot of things. It's the same with supplements and things like that. Supplements is a massive industry. Yeah. Massive industry with huge marketing budgets. Do they really work? who knows? You know, some of them have science, you know, proper scientific research behind them, and they've got ingredients in that are scientifically tested, that are more treated like they would, you know, a drug that is, you know, produced for, you know, whether it be a horse or a human, you know. But some of them, it's just laying claims on things that aren't really the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's, you know, it's the language of which you use, you know, like I keep going back to that pressure, and it's like, well, people mistake what pressure is, you know. Oh, it's high pressure, it's pressing in here. No, pressure is mass over a surface area. The only way to increase that pressure is to decrease the surface area or increase the mass on top of it. Yes, you have areas of peak pressure because of the forces directing it in that area, but yeah, which I think is where these pads can make a difference. But the research that's been out there, in particular pads, because obviously it's my field, I know about it, has still shown that wool is the best material that you can use, and it's why saddles to this day are mostly still flocked in that. So I think it's, but you know, going back to companies as a whole, I mean, there's plenty of, you know, I mean, gosh, you get everything now is backed by science, isn't it? I mean, you've got even boots and bandages and, you know, rugs and magnetics and this and ceramics and.
The hard thing is though as well, I mean, because I know I would be very guilty of this. I mean, how many of us actually go and find the scientific research? I mean, I don't.
Well, that's my point. Yeah.
You know, I mean, you look and you go, you know, oh, well, they've done a scientific study on it. I mean, for all I know, the scientific study might have said, no, this is a horrendous thing and you shouldn't use it. I wouldn't know because I haven't looked it up.
Yeah,
but you know, we don't. People don't. You believe
not actually
what
a science
told.
Research.
Yeah.
This is the other thing. I mean, I've had a discussion before with several people, and they'd go, "Oh, I want to do my own research. I want to do my own research." Okay, cool. Well, that's going to be a couple of years in the making, and that's also going to need to be funded. And what university are you going to base it out of? What scientists are you going to use? Oh, no. I just want to get it in a magazine. And I was like, no, that's not research. That's anecdotal evidence. That's data collection. That's a survey. That's fine, but that is not peer-reviewed research. And there is a vast difference, and I think that this is the problem, that a lot of people think that because somebody said, oh, it's scientific research, that it's then a proper white paper that's been proven in a lab or under certain specific details. But like you say, even some of those peer-reviewed papers, they can have such little data collection points that the measurements are not worth relying on.
Not really, no. And the thing is, you know, like people forget, you know, whether you like them or not, you know, the drugs companies spend millions on research.
Have to, right?
They have to.
Yeah,
they have to. So whereas because of course with supplements or with, you know, equipment, you don't have to, then people don't, because of course they want to make more profit. But then, you know, when people complain about how expensive drugs are, I mean, they've already spent millions in the making.
Absolutely.
And they may spend millions on researching a drug to find that actually it's not viable. Doesn't work.
The side effects are too much that it doesn't work. But that's also scary in itself. I know we're as we are so famous for going off tangent, but I think the supplements and that kind of industry is a really interesting thing, because I was talking to a human nutritionist a few weeks back for my own health, and she was saying, you know, and I said, well, I've got on this and I've got on that, and she said, well, okay, what company is supplying this supplement you're taking, and what? Because there is the supplement company in the human world, let alone the animal world, but in the human world has no real legislation on it. So they can say that it's got, I don't know, 10 milligrams of vitamin B, but that just means it could have, doesn't actually mean it's got it. So, you know, if you think that's in the human world, who's legislating and who's actually watching what's happening in the horse world? And I know that Beta, and there's a new organisation, I can't remember it, so I don't want to get it wrong, so I won't say it, but I was reading it in the Trade News magazine. They've set up a new feed and supplement organisation, and but I don't know that they've got a specifically where they're taking supplements and they're testing the actual quantities in them, and whether they match what they're actually saying. So yeah, I think it's just, like you said, it's doing your own kind of research on something, especially something that's quite as expensive as some of these products that are being proposed to make massive differences to horse welfare.
Yeah.
And just, don't be scared to go, I don't need to be the lamb and go with everybody else.
Go with everybody else, exactly, yeah. And I mean, and think, I suppose, as well, is that if you're kind of grasping at straws for something that's going to help your horse because you've got an issue with it, you've got to think, are you missing the point? I mean, if you're trying to find a miracle pad to put under your saddle, well, maybe it's just not the right saddle for the horse. Maybe it doesn't fit well enough. Or maybe your saddle does fit. Maybe the horse has got a pathology in its back that means it's not right.
Yeah.
If you're trying to search for joint supplements to make your horse sound, well, should you be finding a supplement or should you be
calling the vet?
It's
getting x-rays, getting some diagnosis.
I mean, there's a lot of things where I think perhaps, we spend a lot of money on stuff thinking, oh, this will be the difference. This is what's going to then mean I can win things, or I can do this, I can do that. And actually, it's not. You're missing the point completely, But it's hard to do when you have, these things shoved in under your nose, and they, a lot of these things, they look great. But that's the idea of advertising.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
How many times do you see something advertised and then you order it and it arrives and you think, oh, that's disappointing, because they show it. I mean, it's a bit like, you buy a plant online, the photo of it is when it's 5 years old. It looks amazing, and then what turns up is like 2 leaves sticking out of a pot, and you think, oh, that's disappointing. But
you've got to put the effort in.
Because that's how it'll end up. That's not how it started. It's no different actually to how. I mean, I was talking to a client of mine that I was teaching the other day, who works in the fashion industry, and she was saying, she works for various brands. Yeah. And there's a brand that she's working for. They are more about, promoting plus sizes, and they all of the models that they had for the photo shoots are, they were kind of minimum size 14, but they were all kind of size 16, size 18, which, as she said, that's great, that's really good, but that's not going to sell what you want. Unfortunately, you need size 10. Because you're selling the dream, you're selling the idea that if you wear that, this is how you're going to look. And actually, and it's not a nice reality, but that is a reality. So the fact that they may never sell it in a size 10 and they only ever sell it in a 14, a 16, an 18 or whatever is absolutely immaterial, but they'll advertise it in a size 10 because that's what people want to see.
That's what appeals to human nature.
Human nature going, oh, but I want to look like that.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
So it's basically tricking people's mind into thinking, oh, but I'll wear that, I'll look like that. That's why they use such good looking models, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like, they don't use ugly models, do they?
Well, I guess
not. There's a reason why.
Yeah.
Because people think, oh, well, maybe I'll look like that. Well, you won't.
No. No, but I think the whole point this conversation was just about that, wasn't it? Is that marketing, but and it's interesting that this particular company is being called out on something that actually everybody does. But the difference being is they've done it so blatantly. That one sentence could actually be quite crippling to their brand and the marketing going forward.
Or it could have just raised so much profile for them that actually...
Like we were saying earlier, the algorithms on social media, they love attention.
Picking it up.
So the more people that are tagging it, the more people that are talking about it, the more people that are promoting it and blah, 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 the more that's going to feed their algorithm, which is going to then push their products even further and then their material further, which means they're going to meet out to more people that probably haven't seen the statement that they made in the first place. So is it really going to do them any harm? And, we've had the discussion before of how matter-of-fact shall we be with some of our discussions.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it is, well, as I say, there's no such thing as bad advertising, is there? But
well,
I mean,
marketing, no. I don't know. Jaguar kind of went a little bit pear-shaped with their latest advertising. Did you see that when they rebranded their thing last month?
No.
Oh dear.
Oh, was it a fail? Oh well. But if we're all good, if people start talking about it,
exactly
it's
that.
done its job. I mean, it's no
Exactly
different.
that.
You know, you watch. My uncle used to work in advertising and things, and it's like, you watch some TV commercials. Not that people watch that many anymore, but TV commercials. You often remember the really bad ones. So the ones that you go, God, that is such an awful commercial for so and so.
Yeah.
Well, that's done exactly what it was meant to do. It was meant to make you go, I remember that product.
Yeah.
And you remember it because it was such an awful commercial, but it's still done what it should do.
Yeah.
But I think people need to be careful of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I do think that, I mean, hopefully this is kind of something that's going to, as in what's happened with this brand, is something that's maybe going to cause people to start questioning things a little bit more, one would hope. And especially because nobody's seen any of the published research that they're purporting to be associated with. They're beautiful looking pads. They come in all of the lovely colours and they're nicely made with nice fabrics and stuff. But at the end of the day, they're a piece of memory foam. They're not, and that memory foam was not designed for that job. It was designed for people on bed rest. It was designed for a static use. It was not designed for muscles to be rapidly firing in a horse's back underneath the saddle. But they're also they're not cheap for what they are either.
But then what in the horse world is cheap?
Well, this is true.
I mean, this is why the amount of things that over the years, I've come up with an alternative that is not horse related. I mean, even buying a bucket, for God's sake.
Yeah, absolutely.
You buy a bucket from a tack shop and it's a £5. You buy a bucket from B&Q and it's £1.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
or Lidl or Aldi or anything.
it's the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just in a different store.
Absolutely.
So,
it just might not come in the matching colours though.
Well, it might not, but do you care? Like, really?
Some people do.
Well, maybe, but like, Jesus, I'd rather save the money. But there are so many things that you can substitute. In the horse world with something that is the same product. Yeah. It's just marketed towards a different direction.
Yeah.
Absolutely. People need to be savvy about these things.
Yeah, I guess that's basically the point, isn't it? Is that, what's happened in this event is not something really new. It's just been quite matter of fact about it. And trying to indicate that you don't care about your horse is probably the worst wording they could have used, but at the same time probably the best wording they could have used for the sake of their social media posting. Don't just believe what you read. Have a think about why you're using something. And I think Casey just stopped on a really good point there of it, when it comes to supplements and things like that. Just because it worked for somebody else's horse doesn't mean it's going to work with yours. Each horse responds differently. I mean, I know one of my horses can't be on one supplement and the other one can't be on that, and they can't be on the same because it just works differently on each one.
No different, calmers. I mean, I'm not really a huge one for using calmers, but I have in the past, and I've had the odd calmer that on one particular horse works really well, but I use it on another one, does absolutely nothing. Yeah. But something else works.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just, it's working out what does work and what doesn't work.
Well, I've got the same with Flow. I mean, in the spring, I put them on a little bit of some branch chain amino acids. So I put them on an amino acid complex to help them develop some muscle and help support them while they were developing their muscle. I put her on one. I put Sid on one, and he was just like, yeah, fine, whatever. It's the same as ever. Put her on it, and she was like as spooky as hell. She was like got a bee in her bonnet all the time and just drove her anxiety levels through the roof. And I was like, there isn't even anything in this. Like, it's sugar free. It shouldn't be having this effect, but it did have this effect on her.
It's no different to feed, isn't it? Yeah. Certain feeds don't agree with some horses.
No, absolutely.
In all sorts of different ways. So
I guess it know what's right for you and your horse. don't necessarily have to go the most expensive thing just because that's what you feel might offer the best. Don't get me wrong, there are some very brilliant products out there that aren't the cheapest, but they may be best to save your money for. But also, again, it doesn't mean it's going to work for you and your horse.
Exactly.
So, you know.
Best bet, if you can, with all these things, borrow it. Borrow it first.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Ask your friends what they've got and borrow it.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
I've borrowed so many bits of equipment and tack and God knows what over the years just to try it and see whether it works, because why spend the money on something if actually it doesn't work?
Absolutely.
You know,
and also more than once. Don't ride in it just once.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, don't do it just once. It's not enough.
Not
when we're talking about supplements and feeds, it takes 3 to 4 months for the horse's gut to actually adapt to anything that's coming through there. I mean, some things like these branched chain amino acids drove her pretty crazy within a few days, so we know that wasn't going to work. But yeah, it's giving it over a few rides and really getting a good feel for what's going on.
Exactly.
And if you can find a cheaper alternative that is the same, then why the hell not? It doesn't have to have the horse title in it, or equestrian or equine or anything like that.
Exactly.
You know?
It could be common garden that you find down the middle aisle in Lidl or somewhere. You know, and that's fine.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
No, exactly.
Absolutely. So anyway, we hope you got something from that, and I hope that you're all kind of enjoying the drama that's going on TikTok.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? You know, see people kind of ranting back and forth to each other, but
yes, in particular that one lady, was it the Australian lady?
The Australian lady. There's been a bit of a
she called her out, didn't she? Like straight out.
Back and forth. Anyway,
it's like watching EastEnders.
We might have the same after this. Who knows? We might have people like ripping us to shreds.
Possibly, but hey ho.
Whatever. It's
if we help one person.
Yeah, that's
honestly.
Fine.
You know, and I think like for me, boring. I know, but didn't grow up with a lot of money, so I had to learn to budget. And I'm sure there's been times where you've had to really go. I can't afford to. Buy that one, so I'm going to do my research and find the next best thing of what I can. And and to guilt trip people that couldn't maybe afford a £300 pad or a £250 pad, whatever it is. It's a bit unfair. It is a bit unfair, really, because it is almost a little bit of that segregation. Well, you're not our client because you can't afford it.
And you shouldn't feel like you failed because you can't afford the really expensive things.
No, definitely not.
Life can get a bit too all about the fancy stuff.
Absolutely.
And actually it can do the same job. You know, at the end of the day, you buy a set of boots, if they fit and they protect your horse's legs, they're doing the same job as the fancy ones with all the bling and the croc and the diamantes and all that stuff.
You love a diamante, don't you?
I love a diamante, of course, right. But they do the same job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who cares? Who cares?
Yeah.
You can still look smart in something that is quite basic and inexpensive.
Absolutely.
So
we need a Primark for the horse world. That's what we need.
Yeah. Primark for horse world. Ooh. There we are. Look. Business venture. Anyone fancy investing?
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Cool. So anyway, we got sidetracked again, but we hope you stuck with us and you can just appreciate, and please do never ever feel guilty for not being able to buy the most expensive this or the most expensive that, because
most of us haven't been able to do that anyway, so shouldn't worry. And give us your thoughts. Be good to hear a bit of feedback and what you think.
Yeah. And rather than just messaging us privately and saying how much you're enjoing it, which is fabulous,
which is lovely.
We really appreciate that.
We do really appreciate that people do send us messages and say how much they're enjoying things. But yeah, put it on
the socials.
Yeah. Put it publicly.
Because we need the algorithm to like us too.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, we shall see you next time. This is a short one, and we will see you again soon.
See you later.